A terrible disease is spreading throughout the United States, and it's not COVID-19. This is an even more harmful disease that isn't physical at all. The disease I'm talking about is media bias, one of the largest adversaries facing the free world in 2021. With a society that relies so heavily on technology, inaccurate and manipulative media, mainly presented by left-wing sources, negatively impacts the fragile minds of our citizens, and without immediate action will eventually lead to the fate of our great nation. Big tech companies, Hollywood, and almost every group with high levels of influence throughout all forms of media pushes the left-wing narrative, which is dangerous for all Americans who value freedom, but especially harms Christians throughout the United States. Content presented by mainstream media manipulates American citizens into believing a false narrative, poisons the minds of our youth, and suppresses Christian ideas. These corrupt media outlets will eventually lead to the destruction of the Republican Party and ultimately the death of many American freedoms. In my speech, I will first speak about the effect big tech companies have on the general populace. Next, I will discuss the left-wing media's attempts to cancel police officers using misleading news content, the effect that social media and celebrity has on America's youth, along with the left's attempt to cancel Christianity. Finally, I will discuss how Americans can protect the free world and respond to such toxic media. Liberal media floods the general public, and big tech corporations such as Google use their immense power that they possess over the public eye to sway thousands of people to the left, using extreme bias and manipulation. Everywhere we look, liberal media floods commercials, articles, and most importantly, Google searches. Due to the United States' complete reliance on technology, Google, the most used search engine in America, possesses an unbelievable amount of influence over the public. Google pushes left-wing sources, which heavily influences many Americans who are unaware of its bias and its inaccuracy. The mindset of the general public directly reflects the narrative pushed by companies such as Google, who use their power over society to manipulate so many Americans. One study even proves that online search plays a particularly prominent role in the democratic process during election season. During the 2012 election cycle, a survey of persuadable voters revealed that 49% get their news about campaigns and the election online, largely through search engines like Google, and that these voters generally trust the information that they find online. Now, of course, people in modern-day America use the internet as their main source of information, but what does this have to do with Google and left-leaning news sources? Can't people decide what they want to believe when they contrast the sources with different leanings? With such a powerful influence over American society, Google should bring precise, accurate information straight to the people so that Americans are able to understand the truth and create opinions on their own. However, this is far from Google's true intentions. In Google searches, left or far left-leaning news sources receive 40% more exposure in the top results than any right-leaning news source. Of course, people can choose which sources they believe to be true, but when the main search engine used throughout America is flooded with liberal media, this is when it becomes an extreme danger to the general public. When a corporation such as Google possesses so much influence over a vast portion of American society, this threatens democracy and freedom of thought, foundations that our great country is built upon. Not only does this type of news media affect political issues within the United States, but the great power that these big tech companies have over our nation's future is genuinely concerning. With so many of these biased, left-wing sources forcing this exact same narrative, the consistently negative view of conservatives and the police force must be truthful, right? Well, contrary to a popular opinion, this is an extremely flawed line of thinking. The sheer number of sources pressing the same narrative does not make the story truthful. Everywhere you look online, countless news articles tell the public time and time again about the dangers of racially motivated police brutality, along with the many people who have been killed due to the corrupt police officers who carry out such acts of violence. One left-leaning source warns the public, saying they, police officers, use their title to legally discriminate against people of color, and they use their privilege to avoid consequences. Police officers stand fully armed against peaceful protesters, tear gassing and releasing lethal rubber bullets on unarmed civilians, fighting against police brutality. When reading such radical sources, using such strong language, the unprotected viewer is inevitably drawn to accept and believe the information presented by the source. This information regarding the excessive force used by police officers that the media blows greatly out of proportion creates both a distrust and overall disrespect for law enforcement among American citizens, which can be extremely harmful to communities within the United States. So many sources contradict the genuine truth, so it is extremely difficult to differentiate between reliable, factual sources and manipulative news that pushes a political agenda rather than bringing the facts directly to the American people. Van Gordon Sauter, writer for the Wall Street Journal and former president of both CBS News and Fox News, says, "There's probably no way to seal the gap between the media and a large segment of the public. The media likes what it is doing, admires it, celebrates it. There is no personal, professional, or financial reason to change. If anything, the gap will expand. Ultimately, the media finds the deplorables deplorable." The media is not blind to the gullibility of the general public, and in fact, they use this to their advantage. They use their power and influence over the public to input concepts and ideas that they yearn for the general public to believe, rather than simply bringing people the truth. Along with many other controversial topics that have ruthlessly spread across America, liberal media uses manipulative tactics to force exactly what they want the general populace to believe. Although every uninformed viewer of inaccurate media can possibly be swayed into believing a false narrative, America's youth, and ultimately the future leaders of our country, suffer the most from this type of news media due to their fragile, inexperienced minds. The agenda of the left-wing media is not to inform with accurate news, but rather to completely control the thoughts of the general public. In order to prove this, I interviewed 2 students from Mason High School, both claiming to be overall well-informed and involved in modern-day American events and politics. Student 1 claimed to use primarily left-leaning news sources such as CNN, MSNBC, and the New York Times. I first asked this student about his opinions surrounding the current disrespect facing police officers all throughout America in the past few years. He followed with his response saying, "I think that the situation, society's disrespect and hatred surrounding cops within America is definitely deserved. They have given to themselves reasons to be disciplined for what they do, including police brutality and a lot of acts of violence against people of color." I then asked the same question to a second student who claimed to use right-leaning news sources such as Newsmax, Fox News, and the Daily Wire. His response greatly contrasted that of the first student. Student 2 says, "The hatred that police officers face within America is saddening. Brave men and women who put their lives on the line every day deserve to be respected by the communities they are trying to protect. And just one bad apple of a cop, now people think that the entire system is wicked and racist." Obviously, the difference in these 2 students' thought processes is vast, and this comes directly from the media they consume on a daily basis. Left-wing media outlets constantly promote the disrespect of police officers, manipulating the consumer of this media into believing that all cops are bad and the entire system is wicked. As I took a deeper dive into the interview, I asked student 1 his opinion surrounding the events of the shooting of Jacob Blake a few months prior to the interview. The student responded with, "I think that this event was another blatant act of racism. An innocent, unarmed black man shot by racist cops who abused their power and authority. He had his kids in the car and was unarmed, but the cops still shot him multiple times." I then asked student 2 the exact same question in his interview, and yet again, his answer completely differed from student 1's. He answered saying, Jacob Blake's shooting was definitely justified. He was acting in an aggressive manner and even told the officers that he had a weapon in the car and was going to go get it. It was not until he began reaching into his front seat for the weapon that the police protected themselves by using lethal force, which was definitely the right thing to do. With these 2 answers contrasting so greatly, the question we must ask is, what is the truth? Well, after the case had settled down and many rumors about the shooting were put to death, the Kenosha Police Department informed the public that Blake was armed with a knife and Officer Shesky ordered him several times to drop it, but he would not. Shesky's attorney, Brendan Matthews, said Shesky fired because Blake started turning toward the officer while holding a knife. After the facts about the shooting are released, we see this event as an act of self-defense. So where does this thinking of student 1 come from? Why does he automatically believe that the shooting was racially motivated strictly because it involved a white officer shooting an African-American man? Well, the answer is clear. Left-wing media pushes the ACAB, all cops are bastards, narrative so intensely that many of the people who consume this type of biased media and are unaware of the manipulative nature of its content will be swayed towards this ideology, even if the majority of stories are misleading and untrue. Sadly, because of this type of news media, vast amounts of Americans have lost respect for law enforcement officers, the very people who protect both our freedoms and our communities. America's youth, the future of our country, are heavily influenced by the internet. An online media that is flooded with leftist bias and misinformation, it is our job to protect these young people, not allowing them to be influenced by unreliable media and by public figures. Dangerously, much of today's youth acquires information from social media, where Hollywood celebrities and professional athletes have their most powerful voice. With society and mainstream media pushing a narrative implying that celebrities possess credible opinions on political topics, our youth and many other people throughout the US are in danger of gathering false information from these sources. All over the country, we see what a powerful impact that celebrities have over the minds of young people who look up to them in their profession. Hillsdale College released an article touching on this topic in incredible depth. Jason Whitlock, the author of this article, says, "Technology has helped advance the process, diminishing the influence of traditional authority figures and strengthening the reach of celebrities. Kids shut their bedroom doors, turn on their televisions, laptops, and game consoles, plug in earbuds, open social media apps, and disappear into a world far removed from mom and dad. With a mere push of a button, they tune out the worldview of their families and tune in the worldview of athlete LeBron James, actress Lena Dunham, rapper Snoop Dogg, social media race fighter Sean King, and others like them." Let's think about this on a practical level. Would you go to your English teacher with help on your math homework? Of course not. So why do Americans believe that celebrities and athletes who are paid to entertain and perform possess reliable, credible opinions regarding societal issues and political topics? With online content constantly rising in popularity, countless people view athletes and celebrities as role models more now than ever. And unfortunately, the words and actions of these celebrities possesses a vast amount of influence over the public, which is causing so much harm to the freedom of thought within young American minds. Raising children is not a topic left uncovered throughout scriptures, and the command to parent wisely and diligently appears in Deuteronomy 6:6-9, saying, "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." And again in Proverbs 22:6, saying, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Clearly, the scriptures teach us how to raise our children, bringing them up with wisdom, helping them learn the scriptures, and teaching them how to walk down the path of righteousness. Part of this command is also assisting your children in learning how to be in the world and not of the world, which is incredibly important, especially in modern-day America, where an enormous amount of people are living contrary to how the scriptures command us to live. It is of incredible importance in Christian households that in America to teach children how to defend themselves against the world who attempts to destroy them, and differentiating between what is righteous and what is of the flesh. As Christians, Scripture teaches us that this persecution of our beliefs will constantly occur day in and day out due to our lives that contrast the desires of our flesh and therefore the will of the people. Within modern-day America, especially in left-wing media, we see a spreading hatred of Christianity and almost an unspoken effort to cleanse the earth of Christian ideologies completely. The constant persecution that followers of Christ will inevitably face is covered clearly all throughout Scripture, and we are now seeing this take place all throughout America. In the Gospel of John, he writes, "If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they keep my word, they will also keep yours." In John's gospel account, he warns Christians of the persecution that they will inevitably face during their walk with Christ. This truth directly correlates to the events unfolding within and throughout America today. The reason for such widespread hatred lies directly in the main sources of news consumed by the public. Content created by left-wing media outlets tends to be secular, non-Christian content, and the ideologies presented by such sources are continuously forced into the minds of the American people everywhere we look. In a separate study, similar to the one I mentioned earlier in my speech, carried out by Northwestern University, it showed yet again that within 6,302 articles, a concerning amount of them were from left-leaning sites such as CNN and the New York Times and Google's top suggested searches. With so much information influencing the public, swaying citizens towards demonizing Christianity, the persecution will inevitably follow as a result. The big tech corporations that essentially rule the constantly expanding internet press leftist ideologies on the public that many times are contrary to Christian beliefs. Content such as this sways citizens towards a very negative view of Christianity, and this narrative is spreading like wildfire. Christians will obviously always face persecution and exclusion from society, as explained in John. But it is the duty of Christ's followers to continue the fight and stay persistent in sharing the gospel, no matter how difficult it may become. So what are true American patriots to do in such a country, flooded with misleading media, marked with stains of manipulation? Truth. The search for truth is so very important because truth is so very difficult to find. My fellow Americans, our country is under attack, and our freedoms are slowly being taken away. Media no longer serves as a tool to make ourselves aware of what's happening throughout the world in the U.S., but it is now a weapon used by powerful companies to control the minds of our people. American citizens need to be made aware of the agenda pushed by such corrupt companies and people with powerful, influential voices in society. We must raise our children with the ability to differentiate between truth and fiction. We must monitor the trust we place in governmental organizations, big tech corporations, and popular celebrities. Far too many uninformed young Americans instantly believe the first thing that appears on the screen, and this type of behavior is extremely dangerous to American democracy. The consequences of placing our trust in the mainstream media's propaganda has already begun to show within and throughout our great country. Beware, fellow Americans, of what is to come. Search for truth beyond what is seen on a screen. Examine events unfolding all around you and protect patriotism and freedom at all costs. The end of democracy is coming, but we have the power to stop it. So speak up to protect freedom and truth. Speak up to protect America. Thank you.